I now turn the program over to my son, Michael, Vice Chairman of the Foundation, who will talk more in detail about the Solutions Initiative and the day ahead. Michael, please.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. In our view, the fiscal outlook represents the single greatest threat to this nation's future. Our foundation's mission is to increase awareness and accelerate action on addressing this challenge. As Pete said, we've seen real progress since we met here last year. The winds have shifted. Instead of asking the question, why should we worry about our federal debt, Americans are asking the question, when and how are we going to do something about it? That's why our foundation launched the Solutions Initiative. Its purpose is to gather voices from across the political and generational spectrum to express their views on the when and the how. We offered grants to 6 highly respected organizations to come up with solutions to the fiscal challenge: American Enterprise Institute, Bipartisan Policy Center, Center for American Progress, Economic Policy Institute, the Heritage Foundation, and Roosevelt Institute Campus Network. We also engaged the Tax Policy Center and Barry Anderson, former director at CBO, to serve as our official scorekeepers to ensure a fair comparison of the plans. As a result of their hard work and dedication, all of us can look at several real and viable ways to stabilize our fiscal path, and in the process, consider a range of views about the role of government. Let me first briefly describe the fiscal challenge that these organizations and we as a nation face. There are many ways to measure a country's fiscal health, but the best overall gauge is debt relative to the size of the economy. Many economists suggest maintaining a debt-to-GDP ratio of not more than about 60%. And they say it's dangerous if it stays higher than about 90%. As all of you know, right now our debt totals $14 trillion. If you exclude Social Security, Medicare, and other trust funds, our public debt is about $10 trillion. That's about 65% of GDP. Now that's already quite high, but a strong country like ours can manage that. The real threat is right in front of us. Let me remind you about the dangerous path we are on. Our federal debt is about to skyrocket. This is what the CBO projects based on our current tax and spending policies. This is the dismal future we face if we don't change our course. In only about 10 years, interest expense alone would be more than $1 trillion every year. That's the US government paying out more than $100 million every hour of every day, and most of it to foreign countries. So we asked these 6 organizations to address this challenge however they wished. We gave them no requirements, no guidelines, no targets. We simply said, look across the entire budget and make any changes you want. We will score your plans and compare them at the 10 and 25-year marks. Now, I'm very encouraged by what these 6 organizations were able to do. As you can see from this chart, all of them were able to put us on a sustainable fiscal path and lower our projected federal debt levels significantly. They put themselves on the line and made the hard choices. They examined the trade-offs and made the tough decisions. They each lay out a path to fiscal responsibility that reflects their vision for America. This project revealed at least one fundamental consensus. Organizations from across the spectrum agree that we must get on a path to lower our debt. And as you can see, their plans all result in a much lower range of debt to GDP in 2035. In terms of the actual policies, each of these organizations has presented their own unique perspective on a way forward. There were some interesting new ideas, some common approaches, and of course, many differences. All 6 maintain a safety net to make sure our nation's most vulnerable remain protected. For instance, AEI and Heritage would provide Social Security benefits at or above the poverty level, something the current program does not do. BPC and CAP would enhance Social Security benefits for the lowest income and oldest beneficiaries. All of the plans made changes that affect those with higher incomes. Some would increase their taxes, others would reduce their benefits, and one would do both. On tax reform, all of the organizations felt that current tax expenditures, which amount to $1.1 trillion annually today, were ripe for change. Of course, based on their visions of government, there are indeed key differences among the plans. Overall, AEI and Heritage would keep revenue and spending at lower levels as a percentage of GDP. Other groups propose higher spending and revenues in varying ways and degrees, including greater levels of entitlements. EPI and others increased investments in areas such as education, R&D, and infrastructure. In addition, there were a number of novel approaches uncovered in this project. CAP gives the Independent Payment Advisory Board the authority to limit spending increases in the private insurance market if needed. Roosevelt would link tax rates to income quintiles rather than dollar-based income levels. And both Heritage and AEI would scrap the current income tax system entirely in favor of consumption-based taxes. All interesting ideas. Now, a brief word on the politics of fiscal reform. We all realize that compromise is difficult, but it may be that a grand fiscal bargain is actually what is in the interest of both parties. The best way to keep taxes low is to enact a long-term fiscal plan, even if it has to include some revenue increases. Just imagine what tax rates would be if we don't compromise and interest costs grow to $1 trillion a year. Likewise, the best way to safeguard the most vulnerable in our society is to enact a long-term fiscal plan, even if it requires gradual adjustments. Tweaking social programs today is much better than dismantling them tomorrow in a crisis. While this will require some difficult discussions, we all know it is much easier now than in a crisis. If you think this is a tough discussion, imagine budget negotiations where you have translators in the room. Let's not go there. Now is the time to do it on our terms. A few words about the program for today. We'll start with a conversation with our keynote speaker, President Bill Clinton. It's almost hard to believe that we had budget surpluses not too long ago. Perhaps he can guide us through the challenge of navigating the fiscal issue in a divided government. He'll be interviewed by Gwen Ifill. Later, we'll hear two distinct fiscal visions for America from Chairman Paul Ryan and Gene Sperling, who will be interviewed by Maria Bartiromo. During lunch, Ezra Klein will moderate a discussion that looks to the broader cultural issues at play in deficit reduction. The panel will consist of Senator Alan Simpson, New York Times columnist David Brooks, David Cody, CEO of Honeywell, who served on the Fiscal Commission, Tamara Drought, author and vice president of Demos, and Megan McArdle, the Atlantic's business and economics editor. In the afternoon, we'll hear from the 5 leaders in the Senate who are working so hard to develop a bipartisan plan. The conversations with Senators Chambliss, Conrad, Crapo, Durbin, and Warner will be moderated by Judy Woodruff. Throughout the day, we'll show brief videos from each of the organizations in our Solutions Initiative, and we'll have a panel discussion with all of them later in the afternoon, moderated by David Wessel of the Wall Street Journal. I want to thank these 6 organizations once again for their great service, giving us all these roadmaps on a way forward. Now, to get started, we have 2 videos, and we're doing these in alphabetical order. So up first is Alan Viard of AEI, followed by Steve Bell of BPC. Thank you.